I cut her ropes, and I couldn't resist the Cherokee girl who changed me forever. The day had begun like any other for him. He was walking through the outskirts of the dense forest, enjoying the fresh air and the quiet that came with being far from the city. He had always loved wandering alone, finding little streams, old trees, and hidden paths that most people ignored. There was a peace in the solitude, a sense that the world outside could wait while he explored these forgotten places. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, painting the ground in patches of gold and green, and he felt alive in a way that was hard to describe. As he walked deeper into the forest, his ears caught something unusual, a soft, almost desperate sound that didn't belong. At first, he thought it might be a bird trapped in a bush, or perhaps a small animal in distress. But the sound repeated, and there was something human about it. A low, frightened voice calling for help in a tone that was more urgent than any natural cry. His heart began to beat faster, curiosity mixing with a sudden edge of fear. He followed the sound cautiously, moving slowly over the roots and fallen branches. The forest grew thicker, the light dimmer, and the air cooler as he pushed forward, bare. Every step brought him closer, and the cries grew clearer. Then, through the shadows, he saw her. She was a girl, young, perhaps in her late teens, with long dark hair falling over her shoulders. Her wrists were bound tightly with ropes, and she was sitting against the trunk of a large oak tree. Her clothes were torn and dirty, and there was a look of exhaustion on her face. Her eyes widened as she noticed him, a mix of fear and hope reflecting in them. For a moment he froze. He had never imagined encountering something like this. He didn't know who had left her here, or why, but he knew he could not walk away. Fear clawed at his chest, but it was quickly replaced by a surge of determination. Without thinking too much, he approached her. "But, hey, are you okay? Can you hear me?" he asked gently, trying not to startle her further. She flinched at his voice, but then she nodded slightly, relief flickering in her eyes. Her movements were cautious, almost instinctive, as if she had learned not to trust strangers easily.
He knelt down beside her, careful to keep his hands visible. "I'm going to help you," he said softly. "Just stay calm, all right?" Her gaze shifted between him and the ropes binding her.
There was a pause, a tension hanging in the air, as if she were deciding whether to trust him. Finally, she gave a small, hesitant nod. That was all the permission he needed. He reached into his backpack for a small pocket knife he always carried when exploring. His hands shook slightly as he cut through the rough ropes, but he tried not to show it. Every second felt like an eternity. When the last rope fell away, she rubbed her wrists and tried to stand, but her legs were weak from sitting so long. He steadied her, offering a hand. "Here, take my hand," he said. She hesitated for a moment, then accepted it. As she stood, her eyes met his, and he noticed the strength in them, despite the fear and exhaustion. There was a fire there, a will to survive that was impossible to ignore. Once she was on her feet, she took a cautious step back, as if unsure whether she should trust him completely. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't just the words, it was the tone, the way she looked at him, that made him realize how serious the danger must have been. He didn't ask questions yet. There would be time for that later. First, they needed to get out of the forest before whoever had left her there returned. They moved carefully through the trees, him leading the way, keeping an eye out for any sign of danger. Every snap of a branch or rustle of leaves made them both tense. She followed closely, silent but alert, her trust still fragile but growing with every step he took to protect her. As they walked, he noticed small details about her. The way her hands trembled slightly, the way she scanned the surroundings as if expecting trouble at any moment, and the way her eyes softened when she realized he meant no harm. There was something about her presence that was compelling, a quiet strength and intelligence that drew him in, even as he worried about her safety. They found a small clearing and stopped to rest. She sank onto a fallen log, exhausted, while he kept watch nearby. "What happened?" he asked gently, trying not to push too hard. "Bay." She shook her head, hesitating.
It's
Complicated, she said finally, her voice barely audible. He nodded, understanding that some stories needed time to be told. "All right. We don't have to talk yet. Just catch your breath." While she rested, he scanned the area. The forest was dense, but there were no immediate signs of danger. He realized how close she had come to something terrible, and felt a surge of protectiveness. He didn't know her name yet, but he already cared about her safety more than he expected. After a few moments, she looked up at him. "Bess, I'm Ayasha," she said quietly. "I don't know why they did it, but I'm glad you found me."
Her name carried a musical quality, and he repeated it in his mind, feeling the weight of it, the uniqueness.
"I'm Ethan," he replied. "And I'm glad I did too." They stayed in the clearing for a while, catching their breath, sharing small pieces of information. Ayasha was cautious, answering only what she felt safe sharing. Ethan listened, learning about her life, her love for the forest, and the traditions of her people. He was fascinated, not just by her story, but by the calm strength she showed despite everything she had endured. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, they knew they had to move again. The forest could be dangerous at night, and staying in one place too long could attract unwanted attention. They walked side by side, their steps in sync, sharing an unspoken understanding. It was strange for Ethan. He had never felt such a connection with a stranger so quickly. But there was something about Ayasha that made him feel he had to protect her, not just because it was right, but because he wanted to be near her. Every rustle in the undergrowth made them jump. Every shadow seemed like a threat, but they relied on each other. With every step, trust slowly grew. She began to ask small questions about him, curious about his life, his experiences, his own fears and dreams. He answered carefully, sharing just enough to let her see he was human, that he could be trusted. By the time night fell, they had reached a small, hidden area near a stream where they could rest safely. Ethan built a small fire, careful not to draw attention, and they sat together, the warmth of the flames contrasting with the cool night air. They didn't speak much at first, letting the silence settle between them. But in that silence there was a connection forming, a bond forged through danger, trust, and the raw honesty of the moment. Ayasha watched the flames, then looked at Ethan.
"You didn't have to help me," she said softly.
Most people would have walked away. He shook his head. "I couldn't. I couldn't." He didn't know why he felt so strongly, but he knew one thing. Meeting her had changed something inside him. He didn't just feel relief that she was safe. He felt a pull toward her, a desire to know her, to understand her, to protect her. The night grew darker, and they sat in the firelight, talking quietly, sharing small stories of their childhoods, their dreams, their fears. For the first time in a long time, Ethan felt a sense of purpose, a sense that something extraordinary had entered his life. Ayasha's presence was more than comforting. It was transformative. He didn't know what the future would hold, but he knew one thing. Finding her cutting her ropes, and seeing her strength had changed him forever. And as the stars began to appear above them, he realized that this was only the beginning. Their journey was far from over, but for now they had found a fragile safety, a bond born from fear and courage, and the knowledge that together they might face whatever came next. Ethan and Ayasha moved cautiously through the forest, every step heavy with tension. The sun had set completely, leaving the woods bathed in darkness, broken only by the faint light of the fire they had left behind. The forest was alive with sounds, the rustle of leaves, the chirping of crickets, and the distant hoot of an owl. But none of these natural noises could calm the tight knot of fear in their stomachs. They both knew that danger was still near, invisible but real, lurking somewhere beyond the trees.
Ayasha led the way at times, moving with a quiet confidence that surprised Ethan.
Beth's. She knew these woods well. Every rock, every root, every hidden path. Ethan followed her closely, careful not to stumble over roots or make a sound that could alert anyone following them. He noticed the way she listened to the forest, pausing when a branch snapped in the distance, or glancing toward shadows that seemed insignificant, but, in her eyes, were warnings. Her instincts were sharp, honed by experiences he could only imagine, and he realized he had much to learn from her. Hours passed and the two of them walked in near silence, their breaths shallow and careful. Ethan wanted to ask her more about what had happened to her, about the people who had left her tied in the forest. But every time he opened his mouth, he hesitated. Ayasha's silence spoke volumes, and he understood that she wasn't ready to share everything yet. Instead, he focused on keeping them safe, scanning the trees, listening for the faintest signs of trouble. At one point, they reached a small creek. The sound of flowing water was comforting, almost like a shield against the tension pressing down on them. Ayasha paused, crouching beside the water to drink, her hands dipping into the cool stream. Ethan watched her, noticing the way her movements were careful but natural, how she balanced speed and grace even under stress. It made him admire her even more. "We need to keep moving," Ayasha whispered after a moment, her voice quiet but firm. "They might be looking for me. We can't stay in one place for long."
Ethan nodded. He had no idea who they were, but he trusted her judgment.
He knew she had survived far longer in the forest than he ever could alone. He followed her lead, keeping close but giving her space, feeling the unspoken bond between them grow stronger with each passing minute. As they walked, Ethan noticed subtle signs of Ayasha's resilience. She would step carefully to avoid snapping twigs. She would pause and listen when a distant sound reached her ears, and she seemed to have a map of the forest in her mind, knowing which paths were safe and which led to danger. Band. He realized how much courage it must have taken her to survive alone in these woods, and his respect for her deepened. Finally, they reached a narrow trail that seemed less traveled. Ayasha motioned for Ethan to follow her down the path, ducking under low-hanging branches and avoiding thick clusters of thorns. She moved silently, but Ethan struggled to keep up. He felt clumsy compared to her, but she never scolded or criticized him. Instead, she would glance back occasionally, making sure he was safe and keeping pace. That small gesture, simple as it was, made him feel connected to her, as if they were no longer strangers but partners in this silent journey. Hours turned into what felt like days. The night pressed on and the darkness made every shadow seem like a threat. Yet, in the midst of fear and uncertainty, there were moments of light. At one point, Ethan tripped over a root and almost fell into a shallow ditch, and Ayasha's quick reflexes caught him by the arm. For a brief second, they laughed quietly, the tension easing just enough to remind them both that they were alive. That small laugh shared in the dark felt like a bridge, connecting their hearts even as danger pressed in from every side. During a short rest near a small clearing, Ayasha finally spoke more about herself. "I grew up in this forest," she said quietly. My family. We've always lived close to the trees, the rivers, the land. It teaches you things. To listen, to watch, to survive. Ethan listened intently, fascinated. Her words were simple, but they carried wisdom and depth he hadn't expected. She wasn't just a girl who had been trapped in the forest. She was a person shaped by it, strong and resilient in ways he could barely imagine. He shared a little about himself, too, speaking carefully.
I grew up in the city, he said. Concrete, noise, crowds. I never knew forests like this.
I never knew a quiet like this. It's different, but beautiful. Ayasha looked at him with a small smile, almost teasing. Bass. You would get lost without me? She said lightly. Ethan laughed, feeling warmth spread through him. Her humor was unexpected, but it made the long night feel a little easier. As dawn approached, the forest began to change. The darkness receded, replaced by a pale glow of morning light filtering through the trees. Birds began to sing again, and the forest seemed less threatening, almost welcoming. Ethan felt a sense of relief, but he also knew that their journey was far from over. They still had to find safety, a place where Ayasha could be truly free and where they could finally rest without fear. Along the way, they discovered small signs of life. A deer grazing quietly, a patch of wild berries, a hidden pool of clear water. These small glimpses of beauty reminded them why survival mattered, why courage mattered. Ayasha paused to pick a few berries and handed some to Ethan. Eat, she said simply. You'll need strength. He accepted them gratefully, and in that moment he realized how deeply he cared for her. This wasn't just about helping a stranger anymore. It was about protecting someone he had come to admire, someone who had changed his world in ways he couldn't yet explain. Yes. As the morning light strengthened, they reached a hill that overlooked the forest. From this vantage point, they could see the winding paths they had traveled, the dense canopy stretching for miles, baskets, looking out at the view. We're not safe yet, she said quietly, but we're closer. We have to keep moving, find a place where we can hide and rest properly. Ethan nodded. He felt exhausted, but also invigorated. Every step with her felt purposeful, every challenge a lesson in trust and courage. They continued through the morning, careful but determined. Along the way, Ethan noticed how Ayasha's presence affected him. He felt calmer when she was near, more confident and more aware of the world around him. He realized that this journey was changing him, teaching him patience, observation, and resilience. He didn't just admire her strength. He was learning from it, slowly becoming someone better, someone braver. By midday, they found a small hollow by a stream, shielded by tall trees and dense shrubs. It was not luxurious, but it was safe.
Ayasha settled there, her movements graceful despite fatigue.
Bay. Ethan helped gather some dry leaves and branches to make a small resting area. They sat together, the bond between them deepening with every shared glance, every small act of care. Ayasha finally let out a small sigh, the first real sign of relaxation. I didn't think anyone would find me, she said softly. Ethan nodded, understanding the depth of her words. He didn't reply immediately. Instead, he just sat quietly beside her, offering silent support. They didn't need words to communicate the trust and respect growing between them. The hours passed slowly, filled with quiet conversation and moments of reflection. Ayasha told stories of her life, her family, her culture, and the forest that had shaped her. Ethan shared his own experiences, the challenges he had faced, and the dreams he held for the future. They laughed, sometimes softly, sometimes with genuine amusement at small, shared jokes. Bay. They cried silently, too, acknowledging the fear and trauma that had brought them together. As the day drew to a close, Ethan realized that their connection had grown stronger than he could have imagined. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together, and in doing so they had formed a bond that went beyond words. Ayasha's strength had inspired him, and her courage had changed the way he saw the world. She was no longer just a girl he had rescued. She was someone who had taught him about resilience, hope, and the power of trust. As they prepared to rest for the night, Ethan felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. The forest was still full of unknowns, and the future remained uncertain. But for the first time in a long time, he felt truly alive. He had found someone who challenged him, inspired him, and touched him in ways he could not yet fully understand. And he knew that whatever lay ahead, they would face it together. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall trees, casting long shadows on the forest floor. Ethan woke first, his mind still restless from the events of the previous days. The night had been quiet, filled with the gentle sounds of the forest, the distant rush of a stream, the chirping of birds, and the rustle of leaves as the wind whispered through the branches. He glanced at Ayasha, who was still sleeping peacefully. The sight of her calm face made him pause, a mixture of relief and admiration washing over him. She had survived so much, yet there was a strength in her that even the darkest moments couldn't break.
He quietly moved to gather some fresh water from the stream nearby.
The cold water splashed over his hands, and he took a deep drink, feeling the chill invigorate his body. He watched the sunlight glint off the ripples of the water, feeling a sense of hope he hadn't felt in a long time. This forest, which had seemed so dangerous and intimidating when he first arrived, now felt alive in a different way. A place of learning, growth, and connection. When Ayasha finally stirred, she smiled faintly at him. "Morning," she said, her voice soft but steady. Ethan smiled back, feeling the warmth of her presence like a quiet anchor in the uncertainty that surrounded them. They had grown used to each other's company in these past days, and the silence between them was no longer uncomfortable but comforting. They didn't need constant conversation to feel connected. Their shared experiences, the dangers they had faced together, and the trust they had built spoke louder than words ever could. They moved along the forest path together, their steps careful but deliberate. Ayasha led him to a small, hidden clearing she had discovered earlier, a place shielded by dense bushes and tall trees. Breath. Here, the sunlight fell gently on patches of moss and wildflowers, creating a peaceful sanctuary. They sat on the soft ground, the forest around them alive yet calm. It was the first moment in days when Ethan felt he could breathe deeply, free from the tension of fear. Ayasha finally began to speak more openly about her life. "I grew up close to these woods," she said, her eyes distant as if recalling memories from long ago. "My family taught me to respect the forest, to listen to it, to learn from it. Life here isn't easy, but it teaches you things most people never understand. Survival isn't just about being strong. It's about being patient, observing carefully, and knowing when to act." Ethan listened intently, fascinated. He had never imagined a life so closely tied to nature, where every decision was influenced by understanding and respect for the world around you. "I never knew life could teach so much through silence and observation," he said softly. "I've always lived in the city, where everything moves fast, and people often forget to notice anything at all." Ayasha looked at him with a faint smile. "You notice things now," she said quietly. "Even small things, like the way the wind shifts, the sound of animals, the rhythm of the forest."
You're learning.
Her words made Ethan feel a mix of pride and humility. He realized she saw more in him than he saw in himself, and it encouraged him to be more aware, more thoughtful. They shared stories of their childhoods next. Ayasha spoke of her family,
her siblings, and the traditions that had shaped her identity. He told them about festivals, songs, and the lessons passed down from elders, stories filled with wisdom, courage, and the values of her people. Ethan shared memories of his own childhood, of city streets, school friends, and the small joys and disappointments that had shaped him. As they spoke, he realized how different their lives had been, yet there were similarities too: the longing for understanding, the desire to be seen, and the hope for a future that felt safe and meaningful. Through these stories, they began to understand each other more deeply. Ethan noticed how Ayasha's eyes lit up when she spoke of the forest, how her face softened with fond memories, and how her laughter, though rare, was genuine and warm. Ayasha observed Ethan's careful attention, the way he listened not just with his ears but with his heart. It was clear that both of them were learning to trust not just each other, but themselves in the presence of someone who respected and valued them. As the day passed, they moved to a shallow stream where they could wash and refresh themselves. Ayasha taught Ethan how to find edible plants and herbs along the stream's edge, pointing out the small differences that could mean safety or danger. "Nature provides everything you need," she explained, her voice calm but confident. "Band. You just have to learn to see it."
Ethan followed her instructions carefully, feeling a sense of pride as he correctly identified the plants.
The lessons were simple but profound, and he realized that this knowledge passed down through generations was more than survival. It was a way of understanding life itself. They paused for a meal near the stream, sharing bread and berries they had brought. As they ate, Ethan felt a sense of closeness growing between them that went beyond friendship. It was subtle at first: a glance, a smile, a shared understanding. But it was undeniable. He noticed how Ayasha's presence made the forest feel less lonely, how her laughter brightened even the darkest corners of his thoughts, and how her quiet strength inspired him to be more patient, more observant, and braver than he had ever been. After their meal, they continued walking through the forest. Ayasha pointed out signs of animals, hidden paths, and safe places to rest. Every lesson was paired with a story, every path with a memory. Ethan listened, absorbing not just the knowledge, but the wisdom behind it.
He began to understand that Ayasha's strength was not just physical, but mental and emotional.
She had endured fear, danger, and hardship, yet she carried herself with grace and resilience that was truly remarkable. As afternoon turned into evening, they reached a small hill overlooking a wide expanse of forest. The view was breathtaking, with layers of trees stretching as far as the eye could see, touched by the golden glow of the setting sun. They sat together, silent at first, watching the colors shift in the sky. Ethan felt a deep sense of peace, a rare clarity that came from being fully present in the moment. Ayasha finally spoke, her voice soft but firm. "You've changed," she said quietly. Ethan turned to her, surprised. "What do you mean?" he asked. She looked at him seriously, her eyes meeting his. "But when I first met you, you were uncertain, cautious, afraid of everything unknown. Now you notice, you listen, you trust. You're learning to see the world differently, just by being here, by being with me." Ethan felt a warmth spread through him. Her words were more than a compliment. They were recognition, acceptance, and encouragement all at once. He realized then that his feelings for her were growing in ways he hadn't anticipated. It wasn't just admiration or gratitude, it was something deeper, something that touched his heart and made him want to protect her, to learn from her, and to be part of her world. Ayasha, for her part, seemed aware of the change in him as well. Her glances lingered a little longer, her tone softened, and there was a quiet trust in her gestures that spoke louder than words. Night fell, and they made a small camp under the protective cover of trees. Ethan built a fire carefully, keeping it low so it wouldn't attract attention. They sat together, sharing warmth and silence, letting the bond between them grow naturally. Ayasha taught him a few simple songs from her childhood, and they laughed quietly as Ethan struggled with the unfamiliar melodies. The forest around them seemed to breathe with them, a witness to the connection forming in its midst. Before sleep, Ayasha spoke once more, her voice almost a whisper. "You've changed more than you realize," she said. Ethan looked at her, his heart pounding. "And you've changed me too," he admitted. Breath. Her eyes softened, and for the first time he saw vulnerability there, a trust that went beyond words. They had shared danger, stories, laughter, and silence. They had seen each other at their most honest, and in doing so they had begun to understand each other in a way that few ever could. As they settled down to rest, the forest around them calm and quiet, Ethan reflected on the journey so far. He knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that challenges still awaited, but he felt ready. With Ayasha by his side, he felt stronger, more aware, and more alive than ever before. He understood that this bond forged in the heart of the forest was more than coincidence. It was transformation, connection, and the beginning of something that could change both their lives forever. And as they drifted into sleep, side by side, yet giving each other space, both of them knew one thing clearly. The forest had tested them, challenged them, and taught them, but it had also brought them together in a way that neither would ever forget. The journey was far from over, but their hearts had already begun to change, shaped by trust, courage, and the quiet magic of understanding someone completely. The forest had grown darker than ever, a thick canopy of leaves blocking most of the fading sunlight. The air was heavy, almost tense, as if the trees themselves sensed the unease between Ethan and Ayasha. Though they had shared quiet moments, laughter, and trust over the past days, a new feeling now lingered, an invisible weight pressing down on them both. Bang. Danger was close, and the peace they had briefly found felt fragile. Ethan led the way cautiously, his senses sharpened by everything they had faced together. He noticed small signs, broken twigs, footprints in the soft earth, and distant rustling that didn't match the natural rhythm of the forest. Each sign reminded him that the people who had left Ayasha bound were still near, and that their escape had not guaranteed safety. He glanced at Ayasha, who moved beside him with calm precision, her eyes alert, scanning every shadow. She did not speak much, but he could sense the tension building in her body, the quiet signals of someone prepared for conflict. "Do you think they're following us?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper.
Ayasha paused and shook her head.
I don't know, she admitted. I've been careful, but they are clever. They know the forest well, too. We can't let our guard down.
Her words made Ethan's chest tighten. The realization that they could be discovered at any moment was unsettling, but it also strengthened his resolve. He would not let anyone harm her, not now, not ever. They moved silently through a narrow path lined with tall ferns. Every sound was amplified in the stillness of the forest. The crunch of leaves underfoot, the distant cry of a bird, even their own breathing. Each step was measured, deliberate, as they tried to stay hidden. Ethan noticed how naturally Ayasha adapted to the terrain. She pointed out subtle signs of approaching danger, a broken branch here, a disturbed patch of moss there, and he followed her guidance carefully, trusting her instincts more than his own. Hours passed with no direct encounter, but the tension never eased. Ethan felt a mixture of frustration and fear building inside him. He wanted to confront whoever had done this to Ayasha, to make them pay, but he knew that rash actions could put them both in greater danger. He glanced at her and saw the same determination mirrored in her eyes. They had both changed in these past days. Ethan from a cautious wanderer to a protector, and Ayasha from a survivor to a guide and ally. Yet even as they relied on each other, the uncertainty of the threat remained. At one point, they reached a narrow clearing. Ayasha crouched low behind a fallen tree, signaling Ethan to do the same. From their hiding spot, they could see faint figures moving in the distance. Ethan's heart pounded. Whoever they were, they had found signs of Ayasha's trail, and their intent was clear. The people who had tied her before were not finished. The realization made Ethan's fear sharp, but he kept his voice calm when he whispered to Ayasha, "We need a plan."
She nodded, her eyes narrowing as she surveyed the terrain. "We can't fight them directly," she said quietly.
"We need to move through the stream. It's narrow, hidden by rocks and plants. They won't see us if we go carefully, but we have to hurry before they notice." Ethan followed her lead, every movement slow, careful, and deliberate. They crawled low through the underbrush, their hands brushing against the damp earth, their ears tuned to every sound. The tension was almost unbearable, but the trust they had built kept them going. As they reached the stream, Ethan realized how clever Ayasha's plan was. The water was shallow, moving swiftly over smooth rocks, and dense shrubs hid the banks from view. They slipped into the stream, the cool water rushing over their ankles, and began moving silently downstream. Each step was measured, each movement cautious. Ethan felt a mixture of awe and gratitude for Ayasha's skill. She had taught him so much about patience, observation, and survival, and now he saw the results in action. Despite their caution, the forest seemed to conspire against them. A snapping branch echoed in the distance, and both Ethan and Ayasha froze. They held their breath waiting, hearts pounding. Slowly the rustling faded, but the fear lingered. Ethan felt anger rise. Anger at the people who had put Ayasha in danger, anger at the helplessness he had felt before, and fear that they might not escape unscathed. Yet, alongside the fear was a determination stronger than anything he had felt before. He would not let them fail, not after all they had endured together. The sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the stream. They had been moving for hours, yet there was no safe haven in sight. Ayasha's expression grew serious, almost tense, as she scanned the surroundings. "We can't keep going like this forever," she said. "We need to find a proper shelter, Bay. There's a hollow not far from here, protected, hidden. We can rest there tonight." Ethan nodded. The promise of safety, even temporary, was a relief. But he knew it would not erase the fear and tension that had built between them. As they approached the hollow, Ethan noticed a hesitation in Ayasha. Her steps slowed, her eyes darting to the trees as if expecting an ambush at any moment. He reached out, lightly touching her shoulder. "Bye. We're almost there," he said softly. She looked at him, and for a moment her strong exterior faltered. There was a flash of vulnerability in her eyes, a silent admission of fear she had kept hidden. Ethan's heart ached at the sight, and he realized just how much she had endured to survive. Once inside the hollow, they quickly arranged a small resting area. Ethan gathered branches and leaves to create a comfortable spot while Ayasha scanned the surroundings, ensuring no one could sneak up on them. The moment of safety was brief but necessary. They both knew that the forest offered no guarantees, that danger could strike at any moment, yet in this small hollow they allowed themselves a moment of reprieve, a chance to catch their breath, to plan, and to reflect. As they sat together, the emotional weight of the past days began to surface. Ethan spoke first, his voice quiet but firm. "I've been thinking about what you went through, about how alone you must have felt." Ayasha looked down, her hands clasped together. "I've learned to be strong," she said softly. But it doesn't mean it wasn't hard. Every moment was a fight. Against fear, against despair.
I've survived because I had to, not because anyone else was there to help.
Ethan felt a pang of guilt and frustration. I can't imagine what that was like, he admitted. But I do know that I'll do whatever it takes to keep you safe from now on. Ayasha met his eyes, and for a moment the tension between them softened. There was a trust there now, a recognition that they had each other's backs in a way that went beyond words. Yet, even with trust, fear lingered. They both knew the threat was not gone. It was only waiting, watching, planning. As night fell, they kept a small fire burning low and controlled to avoid drawing attention. The flames flickered across their faces, highlighting the seriousness in their expressions. They took turns keeping watch, each aware of the other's need for rest but also of the lurking danger outside. In the quiet moments, Ethan noticed how Ayasha's presence calmed him. Despite the fear and uncertainty, being near her gave him a sense of purpose and courage he had never experienced before. At one point, Ayasha spoke, her voice almost a whisper. Do you ever wonder if we'll ever truly be safe?
Ethan looked at her, seeing the vulnerability she rarely allowed herself to show. I don't know, he admitted.
But I do know that we face it together. And together, we're stronger than we are alone. Bass. Her eyes softened, and she gave a small nod. It wasn't a full answer, but it was enough. In the darkness of the forest, with danger pressing close, they found solace in each other's presence, in the bond forged through fear, trust, and shared resilience. Hours passed with little rest. Every noise outside the hollow made them tense, every shadow a potential threat. Yet they endured, relying on each other for strength, courage, and calm. Ethan realized that the fear they faced was not just external, it was internal as well. Both he and Ayasha had to confront doubts, anxieties, and memories that weighed heavily on them. But through it all, their connection grew stronger. Each moment of shared fear and triumph deepened the trust and understanding between them. By the time dawn approached, Ethan and Ayasha were exhausted, but resolute. They had survived the night, navigated dangers, and relied on each other more than ever before. They had faced external threats and internal doubts, and in doing so they had grown closer. The forest, which had once been a place of uncertainty and fear, had now become a proving ground, testing their courage, their trust, and their bond. As they stepped out of the hollow into the first light of morning, Ethan knew that the journey was far from over. Challenges still awaited, dangers were still near, but he also knew that he and Ayasha had become stronger, braver, and more united. Whatever lay ahead, they would face it together, armed not just with knowledge and skill, but with trust, loyalty, and a deep understanding of each other. And as they moved forward into the forest, hearts still racing but determined, Ethan realized something profound. The struggle had changed them both. But fear and danger had revealed their true strength, and the bond between them had grown into something that could withstand anything the world might throw their way. The sun rose slowly over the forest, spilling golden light through the dense trees. Ethan and Ayasha emerged from the hollow with a quiet determination. The night had been long and filled with tension, but they had survived together, their bond stronger than ever. There was still danger lingering in the shadows, but neither of them hesitated. They knew they had to face whatever lay ahead together, relying on trust, courage, and the strength they had discovered in each other. They moved carefully along a narrow path, alert to every sound. Ethan's heart pounded, not just from fear, but from anticipation. They were approaching a place where the forest opened slightly, revealing signs of human activity, small clearings, old footprints, and remnants of fires. Whoever had captured Ayasha before was near, and he could feel it in the tension of the air. He glanced at her, noting her calm expression and the way she moved with quiet confidence. He realized how much he had come to rely on her guidance, and how much he had grown since they first met. Suddenly, a sound cracked through the stillness, a sharp shout from deeper in the forest. Ethan and Ayasha froze, instincts kicking in. Figures emerged from the trees, moving quickly toward them. There was no time to hesitate. Ayasha grabbed Ethan's hand, pulling him into a narrow thicket for cover. Their hearts raced, and their breaths came fast, but they remained as silent as possible. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a branch, could betray their location, and they knew that survival depended on focus, not fear.
"They're coming," Ayasha whispered, her voice steady.
We have to act fast! Follow me! Ethan nodded, feeling a surge of adrenaline. He had never moved through the forest with such urgency, yet every step was deliberate. Guided by her instinct and knowledge, they darted from cover to cover, slipping through dense underbrush and across hidden paths, their movements fluid despite the pounding of their hearts. The pursuers were skilled, but Ayasha was clever. She led Ethan to a narrow ravine, where the walls of rock and thick shrubs created a natural barrier. The stream at the bottom was swift and deep, almost impossible to cross in one leap, but it offered a way to escape. "We'll use the water," she said quickly. "It will hide our trail." Ethan trusted her completely, following her lead as they scrambled down the ravine and slipped into the rushing water. The cold shock of the stream made him shiver, but he clung to her hand, keeping balance as the current pushed them forward. The water carried them silently, masking their movements from anyone following above.
Ethan realized how much Ayasha's presence had changed him.
He was no longer just a cautious wanderer. He was alert, resourceful, and determined to survive. More than that, he cared deeply, not only for his own safety but for hers. This connection, forged in danger and trust, had transformed him in ways he could not have imagined. As they reached the other side of the stream, exhausted but safe for the moment, they found a hidden clearing surrounded by thick trees. Ayasha led them to a small cave concealed by overhanging rocks and vines. Here, they could rest and recover without fear of immediate discovery. Ethan helped gather dry leaves and small branches for comfort, while Ayasha scanned the surroundings, ensuring their temporary safety. But, sitting together in the cave, Ethan looked at her with admiration and gratitude. "You've saved me as much as I've tried to save you," he said quietly.
Ayasha smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and warmth in her eyes. "We've saved each other," she replied.
Bay. It was true. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty together, and each had relied on the other for courage and guidance. Their connection was no longer fragile. It was steadfast, built on trust, respect, and shared experience. Bask. As the sun climbed higher, Ethan and Ayasha planned their next steps. They knew they could not stay hidden forever. The forest was vast, but danger was persistent. Ayasha suggested moving to a part of the forest where human presence was rare, and the land offered natural protection: rocky hills, thick foliage, and hidden streams. Ethan agreed, feeling confident in her judgment. They packed lightly, conserving energy while keeping essentials close. Every movement was careful but purposeful. During the journey, they encountered small challenges: fallen trees, slippery slopes, and uneven terrain. Each obstacle tested their teamwork, communication, and endurance. Yet, with each success, their confidence grew. Ethan noticed how Ayasha's calm determination inspired him to push past exhaustion and fear. He, in turn, provided support when she needed it, helping her navigate tricky spots and offering encouragement. Their bond had become symbiotic. Each strengthened the other, creating a partnership stronger than either could achieve alone. By late afternoon, they reached a secluded plateau overlooking a vast stretch of forest below. The view was breathtaking. Rolling hills, shimmering streams, and dense woodland stretching to the horizon. It was the kind of place where danger seemed distant, almost non-existent. They settled here, allowing themselves a rare moment of relief.
Ethan felt the weight of the past days lifting slightly, replaced by a quiet sense of accomplishment.
They had survived, they had escaped, and they had done it together. Breath. As they rested, Ayasha shared more of her thoughts and feelings, opening a side of herself that few had seen. She spoke of hope, of the strength she had found in hardship, and of the lessons the forest had taught her about patience, courage, and trust. Ethan listened intently, feeling a mixture of awe and inspiration. He realized that she had not only survived physically, but had emerged stronger emotionally and spiritually.
Her resilience was remarkable and her wisdom deeply moving. Ethan spoke too, sharing his reflections on the journey.
He admitted his fears, his mistakes, and the lessons he had learned. He spoke of how he had grown to understand courage, patience, and the importance of trust. Ayasha listened quietly, offering gentle encouragement. Their conversation was calm yet profound, filled with mutual respect and honesty. It was a moment of emotional clarity, a realization that their experiences had changed them both forever. As night fell, they built a small fire, low and controlled, to avoid drawing attention. The forest around them was quiet, yet alive with life. They sat together, side by side, sharing warmth, conversation, and quiet reflection. Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, not just for the survival and safety they had found, but for the connection they had forged.
Ayasha had changed him, teaching him about courage, trust, and the depth of human connection.
He realized he would never forget this experience, nor her presence in his life. Eventually, the forest grew silent, and sleep became necessary. They rested close enough to feel each other's presence, yet giving space for comfort. Ethan drifted off with a sense of peace, knowing that whatever challenges lay ahead, he and Ayasha could face them together.
Ayasha, too, felt a quiet reassurance.
For the first time in a long time, she felt a sense of safety and trust, a connection with someone who saw her strength and respected her completely. When morning arrived, they awoke to birds singing and sunlight filtering through the leaves. They moved with renewed energy, exploring the plateau and preparing for the next leg of their journey. The forest no longer felt threatening in the same way. It had become a place of growth, reflection, and transformation. Ethan felt a deep sense of purpose, while Ayasha felt a rare lightness in her heart, a hope that had been missing for years. As they walked together side by side, they reflected on their journey. They had faced fear, danger, and uncertainty, yet emerged stronger, wiser, and more connected. Ethan had learned patience, courage, and the importance of trust. But Ayasha had found not just safety but companionship, someone who respected her and shared her values. Together, they had transformed fear into strength and vulnerability into trust. By the time they reached a natural clearing with a clear view of the distant horizon, they paused to take in the scenery. Ethan turned to Ayasha, his eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. "I don't think I would have made it without you," he said. Ayasha smiled, a mixture of relief and warmth. "And I wouldn't have made it without you," she replied. In that moment, they both understood that their journey had not just been about survival. It had been about transformation, connection, and the power of trust and courage. As they continued walking, the forest around them seemed to celebrate their journey. The sunlight glimmered through the leaves, the air was fresh, and the sounds of life, birds, insects, and rustling leaves, felt like a chorus of reassurance. They had faced the darkness together, and had emerged not just alive, but changed. Ethan realized that the Cherokee girl he had rescued had taught him lessons no one else ever could: the strength to face fear, the patience to understand life, and the courage to connect deeply with another person. By the end of the day, they reached a small village on the edge of the forest. It was a place where they could rest safely, plan for the future, and begin to integrate the lessons of the forest into their daily lives. Ethan looked at Ayasha, seeing not just the girl he had rescued, but a strong, independent, and inspiring person who had changed his world forever. And Ayasha looked at him with equal respect and trust, knowing that he had grown alongside her, becoming someone she could rely on completely. As night fell over the village, they sat together reflecting on their journey. The forest behind them had tested them, taught them, and ultimately transformed them. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and danger, but through it all, they had grown stronger, braver, and more connected. Bursts. And in that moment, they knew one thing clearly: the bond they had forged in the heart of the forest was unbreakable, and the lessons they had learned would guide them for the rest of their lives. The forest had changed them both forever,